You know what I love about fiction? It's that anything goes. People have so much freedom when it comes to fiction, and we can create anything out of it, even though it can't actually exist in real life. Which I guess is kind of the point about fiction. It's about things that don't exist. And it turns out that people can develop such a strong connection to something, even though it doesn't physically exist. I mean, obviously, we know that it isn't real, right? But we can be attached to it just as much as the real thing. How does that work? That's something that I feel I had to realize about myself for a while, actually. I don't know about you guys, but I used to not be into very much fiction. I mean, I loved fiction, fictional stories and characters, but I only really had my eye on a few of them. Many of the other fictional stories I was somewhat into were just a bunch of childhood cartoons, but that was basically it. I kind of hid those feelings from myself because I thought I was a weirdo, and I didn't want other people realizing the fact that I could feel any form of obsession, especially towards fiction, but it turns out that this is pretty normal, much like how it's normal to love another person. But when it comes to fiction, we treat it the same way, but the connection could never actually be mutual. I recently learned about people who are fictosexual. Yeah, that's apparently a thing, where people develop attraction mainly towards fictional characters. It's a thing, and it's actually more common than you think it is, and yet it still gets tons of hate. So the question is why? Or why not? Why do we feel connection to things that don't actually exist? The thing about this question is that there's actually many answers to it. People fall for fictional characters for different reasons. Generally, that's just how our brain works. First, we need to dive into why fiction is so powerful. It doesn't just have to be about falling in love with it could just be about being invested in fiction as a whole. For example, why do we cry when we watch a sad scene in a movie? It never happened. Why do we feel embarrassed when a fictional character does something embarrassing? No one's doing anything. It's kind of the point of fiction. Fiction is meant to create something that doesn't exist, but our brains create that. And when our brains engrave that information into our head, we treat it as if something's actually happening. Like when you're watching a movie in a theater, you likely wouldn't ever think, this is stupid, it's just a bunch of pixels. Why does everyone get so excited about freaking pixels on a big bright screen? Or if you're ever reading a book, you likely wouldn't ever think, it's just a bunch of characters printed on paper, what's so exciting about that? We don't ever think of fiction that way. If we did, fictional stories would get tons of bad reviews and it would likely cease to exist. But it doesn't. The whole point about fiction is that it is meant to be built into the mind of the viewer. When we read a story or watch a movie, we obviously know it's not real, but our minds want to know where the story goes, how it plays out, and what the story is meant to entail. And if you get so ingrained in the story, you'll start interpreting the story as something that's actually happening, because we're imagining that this is something that's happening in real life. That's how we get invested into fiction. We have to imagine it as something that's actually happening, which we regularly do. And especially when it comes to the characters, that is where we develop interest in them. Even though they're not real, our brains see them as real because we imagine the story is real. So, people aren't necessarily making it up when they say they're in love with a fictional character. They just feel strongly attached to something, the same way an ordinary person would develop a crush. Now, the question that some people may ask, if you know they're not real and you can't actually date them, why can't you just be attracted to a real person who has those exact traits? Again, this is where people may have different answers. Fictional characters are simple, real people are complex. Even if I look at a real person and I think they look attractive and I'm attracted to them, I can't necessarily date them because they have feelings too. They may not be the person I think they are, or they may actually be someone that I'll grow to hate. Real people can change, deceive, and lie. Fictional characters can't do that, unless the author wants them to, and if they do, the viewer will know. Basically, we know more about fictional characters than we do real people. And other reasons? Some people will say it's easy to obsess over them because no one's actually getting hurt. Boundaries aren't being broken since they don't exist. You won't have to worry about rejection and drama, unless you want the story to have that. Fictional relationships have it easier than real ones. You can control it at your own pace, you don't have to worry about what the other person wants, or just plain and simple. It's fun. So, it's not necessarily bad. The only bad things about obsessing over fictional characters is if you're prioritizing them over real relationships, or you're trying to escape real relationships, or if it just overall impacts your daily life. And most of the time, it doesn't. I would say that fictional love is treated differently depending on the individual. You don't have to be super obsessed 24/7. You also don't have to take it that seriously. Everyone goes their own way when it comes to fictional love. Now, what about me? As I've said in the beginning, I used to not be as open about fictional characters in the past, mainly because I didn't like fiction as much as the average fiction lover. I'm not saying I hated fiction, but I hated that if I got into any fiction, I would get way too invested and I would be sad when it ends and I would have no one to talk to about it. I did everything in my power to not invest into any, because then I'll inevitably be sad. And I don't want to be sad. It happens every time. Of course, I don't want anyone to think that I was extremely against fiction at all. I actually like fiction, but I could never get myself into it as much. Back then, I used to only be into a few, and many others I was only into for a short period of time. And even with the limited amount of fiction I had, I still had my obsessions. I had many ships and connections to fictional characters. I mean, sure, I had that phase where I was into shipping characters that I really liked being together. Not that I'm against it now, it just doesn't excite me as much now. And there's one important thing I didn't mention. I've talked about how I've enjoyed shipping characters together, but I've never talked about shipping the characters with me. They're called self-shippers, or the Japanese term yume shipping, is where people ship themselves with a fictional character and they imagine being in a relationship with them. They typically refer to the character as their fictional other, as opposed to significant other. Now, I used to find that very weird. I didn't like the idea of pairing myself with a fictional character because I exist and they don't, so we're kind of separated between the wall of real and fiction, so I wouldn't know how that worked at all. The thing is, I kind of compared myself to a fantastical ideal, which is an ideal only fictional characters could live up to. Fictional characters look perfect from every angle. Meanwhile, I'm a person who can see every single flaw and mismatch with my appearance. There's no way that the fictional character that I obsess over would ever love me because they're hot and I'm ugly. So I thought, there's no way I could compare to how attractive a fictional character looks. I would look horrible standing next to them. Until one day, I found out I'm actually too normal. Some of the friends I know are a lot more open when it comes to being attracted to fictional characters, and at first, I found that weird. Until I got introduced to this magic, which is called dating games. And so, I started becoming less normal. This is one of the very few things where the viewer can actually interact with the fictional character, so it feels more like you're talking to them. And in the fictional story, the characters are actually seeing you. So the fourth wall kinda doesn't exist here. In that sense, my friends have been introducing me to their fictional crushes and how they obsess over fictional characters, and I guess that made me realize, oh, so I'm actually the weird one for being normal. And since then, I finally started being more open about being in love with fictional crushes. Well, I guess I shouldn't say in love, because I honestly don't know if I'm really in love with the character or if I just appreciate them so much. What the heck. Yeah, I'm in love. And you know what? Openly admitting to being in love with fictional characters made me realize something important about me. I now know what I think is attractive. It was actually the exact opposite of what I'd expected. It turns out I have really odd taste in men. Men who would not be fun to have in real life. Now, hold on a second before you call me weird. I've been into fictional men who would likely be red flags if they existed in real life. But in fiction, they're actually very interesting. Okay? I don't actually have interest in red flags. It's just that fictional characters that appear the most intriguing and exciting are usually the ones that convey toxic personalities in real life. Now, let me explain this first. When it comes to fiction in general, everything, especially character traits, gets heavily exaggerated to make them more attractive. Bad traits in real life are meshed in with thrilling traits. A character that would actually be very toxic, jealous, manipulative, cold-hearted, and violent in real life would be seen as charismatic, mysterious, passionate, and loyal in fiction. And because it only exists in the fictional world, I'm actually the one in control of everything, even though in the fictional scenario, I'm not. Now, obviously, attractive traits like this can exist in the real world without the toxicity, but fiction likes to heighten the tension because it makes fiction a lot more interesting. We don't want drama in real life, but drama in fiction is what makes a story compelling. Let's say I meet this fictional character who's very toxic. If they existed in the real world, I can't control what they do to me, and I'd be in a really bad situation. But in the fictional world, I can control what happens, and since it only exists in fantasy, I'm not actually getting hurt at all. But it's thrilling, that's for sure, because I'm only focusing on the exciting stuff, not the dangerous stuff. I'm embarrassed to admit that, but it's the truth. So, I guess I've had a change of heart over the years. Back then, I used to be weirded out when people self shipped or even shipped in general, despite me having my own shippy phase when I was young. I thought it was wrong because I can't love something that doesn't exist physically. But the truth is, although it doesn't exist, our minds treat it as strongly as if we were in love with a real person. I mean, honestly, what does it mean to be in love? It's just a bunch of neurotransmitters in the brain, and that can happen for anything, not just having a crush on a real person. Just because they're not real doesn't mean they can't be hot, right? When people write fiction, they love making fictional characters attractive because they can be attractive all the time, while real people can't. Maybe you'd find that delusional of me to think that. And so what if I'm delusional because I say I'm in love with an imagination? At least I'm happy.